In this video, we're going to use After Effects to make the pouring effect that we see in this Photoshop file. I'm going to start by saving out the file I need in the resolution and size so that when I import into After Effects, it maintains the resolution and size when I return to Photoshop. I've saved my file out, and now I'm ready to import it into After Effects. I'm importing my Photoshop file into After Effects. And I'm going to create a new composition with it by dragging the file from the Project tab over the New Comp icon at the bottom of the project window. Zooming back on it, I'm going to rotate and position the bottle where I'd like it to be when the liquid comes out of it. V on the keyboard, as in Photoshop, and then W will allow me to click and rotate that file. Once I have it in position, I'm going to reduce the resolution to make it easier on the CPU. At the bottom of the comp window, I'll click on the word full and I'll choose 1/3. Now I need to introduce a layer to animate the path that the liquid will follow. At the top of the user interface, I'm going to Layer, New, and Solid. I'll pick a color, and once I've got that color, I'm going to scale that box down to something quite small. The color is insignificant because once we animate this, we're going to be copying the keyframes from position to a thing called producer in the Mr. Mercury filter. I'll want this to begin animation down off the screen where the liquid will ultimately be pouring onto. In my timeline, I'm going to extend my file. I'll maybe drag it out past 15 seconds. And with my playback head at the beginning of the timeline, I'll hit P to get position and drop the first keyframe. I'll move forward 5 seconds in time, and I'll drag the red box off the upper left-hand corner of the screen. Now I want the liquid to follow this path, and it's straight. I want a bit of an arc. Putting the playback head between those two keyframes, I can now click and drag the box and put the arc in that I might want. I'll return my playback head to the beginning of the timeline. And now I'm going to create a new layer that's closer to the color of the liquid I'd like to come from the bottle itself. Once again, going to Layer, New, Solid. I'll choose the color I might want. And now with that new layer selected, I'll go to Effects, Simulation, Mr. Mercury. I'm also going to extend the length of this clip in the timeline past the 5-second duration I just introduced. I'll drag the playback head close to the middle keyframe to see where Mr. Mercury is on my screen. I'm turning off the layer for the red solid, selecting the red solid, returning the playback head back to the beginning of the timeline, and when I click on the word position, the keyframes are selected blue. That's going to allow me to copy-paste them to Mr. Mercury. With position selected, keyframe selected, I'll hit Command-C to copy. I'll click on the layer that will be my liquid that now has the Mr. Mercury filter on it. In the upper left-hand corner of the app, you'll see the effects channel. I'll click on the time watch next to the word producer, and then I'll hit Command-V. If I were to drag my playback head through the timeline now, I can see that Mr. Mercury is following that path. I'm going to leave the playback head stationary for the duration of this effect because I want to create this and save it out as a Photoshop layer. Up in the effects channel, I'm going to zero out radius X and radius Y. And then I'm going to go down to resistance, and I'm going to drag to the right on resistance. You can see it starts to gather the liquid in to one entity. Now, from this point on, it becomes very subjective in what kind of effect that you want. With the resistance kind of set at 0.6, I'm going to increase the longevity, and that will give me the length that I want for my liquid. Now, I could go further with this in the effects channel. I could change the birth and death size of the liquid, and you can see you can reduce it to bubbles or increase the density of the entire file. Both the death and birth size can be managed. One other thing I might do is change the lighting. Right now the liquid looks more like an oil. The viscosity is very high. So I'll reduce the light height. And in doing so, the liquid becomes a little bit more watery. Now, once I have made the adjustments I want here, I'm going to change my resolution in the composition back to full. And then the other key element you'll need to do to make sure that your resolution remains the same when it returns to Photoshop is to change the screen scale to 100%. And now I'm ready to export this to Photoshop. Going to Composition, Save Frame As, naming my file, and Save. Now I'm going to return to Photoshop. In Photoshop, I'll open my file, and here's my liquid.